March 2023 is finally over, and that marks the end of the first quarter of the year. It's hard to believe that we're already 25% of the way through 2023. We're starting to talk about the future of the Switch. We're talking about, the next iteration of Nintendo's home console business. It feels like the future is approaching at a terrifying or alarming rate. But let's talk about this month. Let's talk about what happened in games this month. If you don't know, each and every month I'm rating my favorite game of the month, and then at the end of the year, I'm going to use those to decide what my game of the year is. The thinking behind that is that if your game of the year, you probably have to at least be the best game that came out in the month you released. So I'm going to use those, and I'm going to pick from those 12 selections that I make, and only one of them can be Game of the Year. This year is surprisingly competitive so far. If you haven't seen last month's video, I'll put a link up at the top of the window where you can see my February pick, which was Metroid Prime Remastered. In January, we had Fire Emblem Engage. Nintendo's kind of been running the board here. They've managed to release at least an interesting or fun game every month, and March is no exception, but I'll be talking about that release later on. We've also had a lot of remakes this year, and of course this month was no exception. We had a really big remake in Resident Evil 4, and I will be talking about that during this video as well. But before we do those, I like to traditionally start out by talking about a few of the smaller games that I played that didn't quite make the cut. They're not Game of the Month material, or they were remarkable in some way, sometimes not in a good way. And let's go ahead and start with one of those games that isn't really good. I wouldn't call it good in any real way. In fact, I can't even really show a whole lot of footage of it. I'll try to maybe get something on screen for you here, possibly. But the game is super crude and disgusting, and that's kind of the point. I'm talking about Postal 4 No Regrets. And if you follow Postal 4, which I don't know why you would, but if you did, you know that it is a game that came out last year. But it got a PS5 release this month, so I figure that counts for March 2023 releases. It did come out on a new platform this month, and that is where I played it, and I hadn't played the game back in 2022, but apparently Postal 4 was the worst game on Metacritic last year, and I can see why. I can absolutely understand why this game was the worst rated game, but I have the benefit of age, and I remember very specifically in the early to mid 90s playing games on my dad's computer, and there was a subset of first-person shooter games that were intentionally offensive. Some notable examples are like South Park for the N64, which was, it was designed to be offensive. You could pee on snowballs and throw them at people. Redneck Rampage for the PC was another notable example where you shot rednecks and there were aliens. It was just, and it had a smattering of curse words, which was like unheard of at the time for video games. So it was definitely, there was a wave of this stuff and that skewed far more offensive than even like Duke Nukem, which was pretty, risque back in the 90s. But this game, Postal 4, is hands down probably the most offensive first-person shooter I've seen, certainly on a console. There's a dedicated button for unzipping your pants, and after you unzip it, you can just pee on people. You can kill whoever you want, but it looks and feels like a 90s bargain bin game, and I mean that in the worst way possible, really. It has horrible graphics. It is ugly as sin. Horrible art and voice direction. There are loading points in the middle of maps. It truly feels like a 90s PC experience, and I don't know if it's intentional or not. I don't know if it just had an extremely low budget, or if they were really going for that 90s kitschy kind of vibe. But regardless of what the intent was, it makes it weirdly charming. It makes it weird. Like, it reminds me of playing a low budget PC game on my dad's computer when I was a kid, and I kind of like it for that, while simultaneously I'm able to recognize that it's not a good game, that I shouldn't recommend to anyone. I don't think you should buy it. I don't think you should waste your money on it, but if you have that weird 90s nostalgic feeling like I do, maybe watch a stream of it and decide if you should play it yourself. I can't in good faith recommend it to anybody. But for me personally, it was a good time insofar as it was funny and absurd and took me back to a place that that I didn't know that I wanted to go again. So Postal 4, no regrets. You're a terrible game, but I like you anyway. I also got to spend some time this month with Chia, which is a charming game about a girl on an island. They sent me a little ukulele as a gift to try out with the game. I wish I could give in-depth impressions about it, but I only played the first 15 or 20 minutes. It makes a good first impression. It's cute, it's charming, it's everything that we've seen in trailers for the game. I will give extended impressions on it somewhere else on the channel, maybe during a GVG cast episode, but it was somewhat fun to play. On the other side of games that I spent some time with, not enough, I also played Gearbox's Have a Nice Death. Have a Nice Death is a Metroidvania in which you play Death, the Grim Reaper, him, her, itself, and you eventually turn the afterlife into a desk job, and you're buried in a mountain of paperwork, and you've corporatized the whole idea of the afterlife and death, and there's no longer any quote-unquote fun to be had, reaping of souls, stuff like that, and you decide that you're going to revolt against the system that you're part of and start taking people out and having fun along the way. And unlike most Metroidvanias, you start out with a really great set of skills. I haven't played a ton of it, so I don't know if they get taken away from you, but I've played maybe 30 minutes to an hour, and I've really enjoyed what I've played. The animation in this game, especially on Switch, is stunning. It is crazy how good this game looks. It looks like you're playing in sort of like a 3D stop motion animation style film. Like it's hard to describe the visual style, which is why you'll be seeing footage of it so that it can do the heavy lifting for me and explain to you what this game looks like. But just the moment-to-moment gameplay is really engaging. Death feels like a powerful character, but it's obviously not something that takes itself seriously. It's lighthearted, it's fun, and it's really enjoyable. I strongly recommend checking it out. Gearbox publishes. They sent a code over my way this month, and I was able to give it some good time. For this month, however, I was torn. And so I'm going to talk about two games kind of in tandem with each other. And these are the two games that I mentioned at the start of the video. So I played a lot. Most of my time this month went to playing Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon, and the remake of Resident Evil 4. And I love these games for very different reasons. Bayonetta Origins is obviously a much different game than Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 is a remake of one of the greatest games of all time, in my opinion. RE4 is certainly the best Resident Evil, but also maybe one of the better crafted games Capcom has ever put out in their entire storied history. So my struggle this month has been between selecting a game that is brand new, that I think does a lot of interesting things, has one of the best art styles I've seen, and makes perfect use of the concept of the platform for which it was designed, and a wonderful reimagining of one of the best games ever made, utilizing the full power of modern hardware to give you an experience that in some ways is better and some ways doesn't quite live up to the original. I think that there's a balancing act here, and even as I'm recording this video, my opinion is kind of shifting and morphing. And if I could award Game of the Month to two games, I would absolutely do it. But this is Game of the Month, not Games of the Month. And so I have to make a decision, and I'm kind of going to make it live with you right now as I record this video. So let's talk it out. Let's start with Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon. If you haven't seen Bayonetta Origins, it is a storybook Bayonetta game. It doesn't play anything like any Bayonetta you've ever played. So if you've played Bayonetta 1, 2, or 3, just forget about those because they're almost unimportant. Cereza is Bayonetta as a little girl, and she is training under a witch to become the powerful person we see in the Bayonetta series. You find out about Bayonetta's mother, Rosa, and that Bayonetta, or I'm sorry, I'm going to stop saying Bayonetta. Cereza is wanting to rescue her mother. Her mother, basically by conceiving Bayonetta with her father, engaged in a forbidden activity, in procreating outside of her Umbran witch clan, right? So she has Cereza. Cereza is shunned because she was not supposed to be born, and Rosa is imprisoned. And Cereza goes to see her mom whenever she can, and they spend time together, and eventually she decides that she needs to rescue her mother, but she lacks the power to do so, becomes an Umbran Witch trainee, and her master, her mentor, doesn't believe she's ready. She gets offered power if she goes into Avalon Forest, and so she sets off on a quest, and she's got almost no magic to speak of, and accidentally summons Cheshire into her stuffed Cheshire doll, and that is the lost demon from the title. And so Cereza and Cheshire quest together to obtain this great power so that she can rescue her mother. And that's about all the story beats you need. In the forest, the game plays like a mix of 2D Zelda and Bayonetta in a weird way. So it feels very action-y, but the focus is more on exploration and discovery, and the world design is so fantastic that it is a difficult game to put down. It is like a very good book because it is presented as a book. Cutscenes are literally pages from a book that are narrated by a elderly sounding British voice, and Cereza is the only character I think that is actually voiced. Like, Cereza has her own voice, but then Cheshire is the voice of the narrator speaking Cheshire's words in like a grumbly tone, as though someone was reading a book to you. And the presentation of that is just so charming and something that we don't see enough of. The art style of this game it looks like it's hand drawn, even though it's, 3D visuals. And there's so much to it in terms of just the moment to moment gameplay. I mentioned that it was perfectly designed for the console it's on, and that's because it is a co-op experience by nature. The idea being you can either use 2 Joy-Con, and one person can take your right Joy-Con and you can handle the left Joy-Con, and one person would control Cereza and the other person would control Cheshire. Or if you're playing single player, the right side of the controller is Cheshire and the left side of the controller is Cereza. And they have to work in concert for puzzles all over the world, as well as battle with enemies. Cereza basically enables Cheshire to do more damage to enemies. She holds enemies in place so Cheshire can attack them more freely. Both players have to dodge. If you're playing as a single person, you have to keep your eyes on both sides of the screen, really, so that you can take care of that. So you can ensure that both Cereza and Cheshire survive the battle. Battles aren't very difficult, but they are fun. They're strategic, and I love that about this game. I don't think games need to be hard to be challenging, right? They can challenge your mind rather than your reflexes, and I feel that Cereza and the Lost Demon is much more a challenge for your mind than for your reflexes. And speaking of that challenge to your mind, there are puzzles everywhere throughout this game. There are actual little bite-sized challenges called, I'm going to mispronounce them because I didn't look it up before this, but I believe it would be like Tir Nanog is how you pronounce them. And they're almost like shrines were in Breath of the Wild. These little bite-sized challenges that have different objectives. Some are combat-focused, where you have to take out a specific number of enemies in a certain amount of time. Others are more puzzle-focused, where Cereza may have a piece of the puzzle that she needs to complete, where she can open up something for Cheshire, and then Cheshire needs to complete something to allow Cereza to move forward. And then at the end, they come together, and there's always I don't know the name for it, but a structure they have to destroy. And destroying it and completing the Tir Nanog dispels illusions set by fairies in the forest. You don't fight angels within Bayonetta Origins, or at least not as far as I've seen. I don't know how far I am into the game, but I'm pretty far in my opinion, and I haven't fought an angel yet. As you continue through the game, you get more powers for both Cereza and for Cheshire. There are skill trees for each of them that you can unlock and gain more abilities, which in turn makes both of them more powerful. And the game tends to get easier as you unlock more and more skills, and you're rewarded for exploration almost always. You'll find treasure, or you'll find resources that you need to level up your character skills, or you'll find just currency. You'll find something in almost every nook and cranny of this world. It's such a well-designed world, and it never beats you over the head with solutions to problems. This game wants you to think, and I love that about it. It's just a wonderful package of presentation and gameplay, and it just clicks for me. It's a real page turner. Again, going back to the book reference, if this were a book, I would not be able to put it down, and I haven't been able to put it down, or at least that's what I was saying until Resident Evil 4 came out. I picked up Resident Evil 4 on Xbox, thanks to the kind folks at Microsoft. They sent me over a code so that I could check out the game and evaluate it for Game of the Month. And wow, I am ridiculously impressed by Resident Evil 4 Remake. I was not the world's biggest fan of RE4. I could appreciate what it did well. And I played through the whole game on Wii. I had it on GameCube and kind of skipped it because if you know anything about me, you know that I'm not a big survival horror person. But I recognize the cultural significance of Resident Evil 4 in terms of the impact it has had on gaming since its release, and I did enjoy my time playing through it on the Wii. The motion controls really made it for me. I initially thought that RE4 on PS5 didn't have gyro, and I was really sad to hear that. I know that it does now. I've been corrected, but I have it on Xbox where it doesn't have motion control, so I'm a little bummed that I can't use that. Controls on the Xbox version are a little out there in terms of they feel a bit sluggish. They don't really the reticle doesn't move as much as I would like it to, or as quickly as I'd like it to. It doesn't seem to be something that can be fixed in settings. So I'm hoping that Capcom eventually patches that. There are also some weird visual bugs in the game in places. Lighting tends to like flicker on and off. Like if you're running through a cave with ray tracing on, it seems like it sometimes takes a minute for the lighting model to catch up to the fact that you've changed, I don't want to say rooms, but changed environments a little. And I'll notice that sometimes, like if I run out of a cave and into a brighter area, it'll be dark and then it'll feel like somebody turned on a light switch and the lights will kind of sort of click on. But these are really small scale issues that I don't honestly care much about, because when I'm playing the game, I'm thinking more about fighting the Ganados and keeping Ashley safe and running through and just having cool moments with Leon, fighting the chainsaw guy, fighting the giant. Those moments are realized in such interesting new ways. Traveling across the lake without loading zones or anything, just being able to go through it. RE4 feels much more modern, and I really appreciate that about it. And I haven't picked up Cereza and the Lost Demon since I started playing RE4. So it's difficult for me. The debate becomes one of, do I value a brand new game that I think is doing everything right for the platform it's on, or a remake of a legendary game that is additive and subtractive in some ways, right? There are things about the original RE4 that I like more, and there are things about this new RE4 that I like more. I saw John, who is our RE4 mega fan, saying it's like a companion piece. It sits alongside RE4 and doesn't replace it. And I find that to be an interesting take. I'm going to trust that he has finished the game and he knows the story beats and everything of RE4 far better than I do, because he's played it a whole lot more than I have. But RE4 is one of the greatest games of all time, and so it's hard for me to put anything up against it and have it win. But I do find my mind going back and forth between these two. I am shocked, honestly, because I didn't have a whole lot of interest in Cereza and the Lost Demon before it came out. And simultaneously, it left such a strong impression on me that I assumed when I got my hands on RE4, I would play it a little, and then want to go back. But I haven't yet wanted to go back. I want to finish RE4 before I finish Thraza and the Lost Demon, even though I kind of know what's going to happen in RE4. And I have no clue where the story's headed in Bayonetta Origins. So I think for this month, and it is by a hair's breadth, I promise you, it is such a narrow victory that my opinion could change by the end of the year. Let's put it that way, because neither of these games are ones that I've finished, right? And I want to evaluate them fully after I finish them. I am confident with my January and my February choices. March is the first month where I cannot say with a 100% degree of certainty that the game I'm about to choose is the winner hands down, because there is such a narrow gap between them in terms of how much I personally have enjoyed them. But this month, I have to give it to Resident Evil 4. RE4 is a visual showcase for what modern hardware can do, and a remake of a classic game, one that was one of the best games ever made, not just of its generation, but of all time. So I have to hand it to RE4, but I have to also commend the folks that worked on Bayonetta for how good that game ended up being and how much it has changed my perception of the Bayonetta series as a whole. After I beat Thraza and the Lost Demon, I'm going back and playing the character action games because I really want to fully understand the lore of this universe. I'm invested now. Now I need to know everything there is to know about Bayonetta. So kudos to Platinum and Nintendo for releasing a game that really managed to change my perception of an entire series. Bayonetta was not ever what I would consider to be a series that I'm even super hyped for, but now that I've played Bayonetta Origins, I have to go back, finish that, and then play the rest. So we'll see how my opinion evolves over time, but I want to know what you think. Did you struggle this month? Did you have a hard time picking your favorite game? If you picked RE4, how do you feel about it in comparison to the original? Let me know down in the comments. That's it for March. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to help support us so that we can make more videos like this, head over to patreon.com/gvgaming to find out how you can do that. And I will see you in April when we're talking about Advance Wars and whatever else comes out that month. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.